Okay, so picture this. It's 1997.
Oh, yeah, back when dial-up was the cutting edge.
Exactly.
Ah,
We were all figuring out this internet thing. Tamagotchis were the biggest responsibility. And life, well,
life felt a little simpler, you could say that.
except if you happen to be in Phoenix, Arizona. On March 13th, things got a whole lot more complicated.
More than complicated, I'd say. Straight up bizarre. Thousands of people witnessed something truly strange in the sky that night.
The Phoenix Lights.
The Phoenix Lights. It's a case that just won't quit. And for good reason. Think about it. This sprawling city surrounded by desert mountains, suddenly you have these unexplained lights appearing overhead.
It sounds like something out of a movie.
You'd think so, but for the people who saw it, it was all too real. And that's what we're diving into today. Eyewitness accounts, official explanations, and a whole lot of questions. We're going to try and unpack it all.
Sounds like a plan. So where do we even begin with a story like this?
Well, one of the most compelling accounts comes from a family driving near Paulden, Arizona. The Lays. They were just heading home when they spotted something unusual.
Okay, so far so normal. What happened?
They thought they were looking at lights attached to a weather balloon. You know, 5 lights in an arc.
Makes sense. But I have a feeling that's not how the story ends.
Not quite. According to the Lays, these lights suddenly detached from this balloon.
No way.
And get this, they started moving independently, forming a distinct shape.
What kind of shape are we talking about?
A giant 60-degree carpenter square.
Wait, a carpenter square? Like the tool?
The one and only? They described this massive shape hovering just above them, like 100 to 150 feet in the air.
Okay, now that's just creepy.
Oh, and there's more. This thing, it was completely silent. No engine noise, no hum, just drifting across the sky.
I can only imagine how unsettling that must have been. This giant, silent object just hanging there.
That detail really gets to people. And it's not just the Lays who reported the silence. As the night went on and these lights drifted towards Phoenix, there was a wave of similar reports coming in from across the city.
Thousands of people saw something that night.
Yeah.
But there's one account that really stands out.
Governor Fife Symington.
The governor.
The governor himself.
Yeah.
At the time, he was a former Air Force pilot.
So you'd think he'd have a pretty good idea of what's up in the sky.
You'd think. But even Governor Symington was completely baffled by what he saw. He described it as unlike anything I've ever seen, compared its size to an aircraft carrier.
Wow.
Initially, he downplayed the whole thing. But years later, he came forward saying he believed it was technology beyond anything we have.
When a former Air Force pilot and the governor are saying they can't explain something.
It makes you wonder, right?
Absolutely. So we have these compelling first-hand accounts describing this massive silent object. But what did the authorities have to say about all this? What was the official explanation?
Well, the U.S. Air Force did offer an explanation.
Okay, and what was it?
They said it was A-10 Warthog jets, flying in formation and dropping flares during a training exercise.
So A-10s and flares. For those of us who aren't fighter jet experts, can you break that down a bit?
Sure. So the A-10 Warthog, it's a ground attack aircraft, known for being really durable and having serious firepower.
Okay, got it. What about the flares?
Flares are basically these pyrotechnic devices that create bright, burning decoys. They're used to confuse heat-seeking missiles.
So the Air Force is saying people saw flares being dropped from planes? Does that really line up with what people described seeing?
It's plausible for some of the sightings. The mountain ranges around Phoenix could have blocked the flares at times, making them seem like they were appearing and disappearing.
Okay, I can see that. And I guess the distance in the atmosphere could have distorted how they looked, making them seem bigger or more structured.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing about lights in the sky. Perspective can play tricks on you. But here's where the Air Force's explanation starts to fall apart. Witnesses like the Lays and Governor Symington, they described seeing a solid, structured object, not just scattered lights like you'd expect from flares.
Right. And what about the size? Aircraft carrier size. That's a pretty big stretch for a group of A-10s, even with flares.
Exactly. The size and the silent movement. Those are two details the official explanation just doesn't address. So we're left with this puzzle. We have a plausible explanation for some of the lights, but then we have these key details that just don't fit.
So what are we left with?
A lot of questions, that's for sure. And it's enough to make you wonder if there's more to the story.
Like maybe what people saw was something else entirely, something beyond our current understanding.
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one that's fueled countless debates, theories, and investigations over the years.
Okay, so we've got this mystery on our hands. We have eyewitness accounts that don't quite line up with the official explanation. Where do we go from here?
Well, this is where things get really interesting, because the Phoenix Lights weren't just a local news story. This event captivated the whole country, and it really pushed the conversation about UFOs into the mainstream.
Yeah, before Phoenix, UFOs were kind of this fringe topic. Science fiction, conspiracy theories.
Exactly, but suddenly you have these credible witnesses, including people in positions of authority, talking about seeing something unexplainable.
It must have forced people to confront the possibility that we might not be alone in the universe.
It did, and that's a powerful concept. Think about it.
I am thinking about it. It's kind of blowing my mind.
It makes you question our own limitations, our assumptions about what's possible.
Like, what if we encounter technologies so advanced that we couldn't even comprehend it, let alone explain it?
It's a humbling thought. And I think it gets to the core of why these kinds of events captivate us. They tap into this deep-seated human curiosity about the unknown, about what lies beyond our understanding.
That's a good point. But the Phoenix Lights didn't just spark our imagination. They also raised some serious questions about transparency and trust, especially when it came to the government's response.
You're absolutely right. The initial denial from the military, followed by the later admission of training exercises, it fueled a lot of suspicion and distrust.
Yeah, it made people wonder what else might be out there, what information might be being withheld.
It played into that growing sense of skepticism towards authority that was really strong in the late 90s and early 2000s. People wanted more transparency, more accountability. They didn't want to be told what to believe. They wanted to see the evidence for themselves.
And in a lot of ways, the Phoenix Lights became a symbol of that desire for truth, for answers that went beyond the official narrative.
It's interesting how these events can act as a catalyst, bringing larger societal issues to the forefront.
Like the distrust of the government and the challenges of reconciling what people experience with the explanations that science can offer.
Exactly. Even Governor Symington, who initially dismissed the incident, eventually changed his stance. He stated publicly that what he witnessed was beyond our current understanding.
That's a big deal. So how do we approach these events with both a critical and an open mind? How do we balance skepticism with the possibility that there might be things out there that science hasn't explained yet?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a delicate balance. On one hand, we need to be critical thinkers, to question the evidence and look for rational explanations. But on the other hand, we also need to be open to the possibility that there might be things out there that challenge our current understanding of the world.
So what do we do? How do we find that balance?
That's where the real excitement lies, in that exploration of the unknown. It's about acknowledging that there are still mysteries out there, things that we haven't figured out yet. And that's okay. It's about embracing that uncertainty.
Okay, I can get on board with that, embracing the mystery. So where does that leave us with the Phoenix Lights?
Well, I think it comes down to this. Be curious, be skeptical, but be open to the possibility of the extraordinary. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even if they don't have easy answers. Keep looking up at the sky and never stop wondering.
Okay, so we've laid out the basics. We've got eyewitnesses, a former Air Force pilot, a sitting governor, all describing something truly out of the ordinary. We've got an official explanation that, well, maybe plausible for some aspects, leaves some pretty big questions hanging.
Right. And what's really interesting is how the Phoenix Lights went way beyond just a local news story. I mean, this thing captured the imagination of the entire country, and it
Yeah.
really pushed that whole conversation about UFOs into the mainstream.
You're right. Before Phoenix, you rarely heard about UFOs outside of like science fiction conventions or late night talk shows. But this event, it brought credible witnesses to the table, including people in positions of authority, all talking about something they couldn't explain. It had to have made people stop and think about the possibility that we might not be alone in the universe.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful concept, right? It challenges everything we think we know.
It's kind of blowing my mind just thinking about it.
Think about Governor Symington's analogy, showing a Boeing 747 to Christopher Columbus. It makes you question our own limits, our assumptions about what's even possible. What if we came face to face with technology so advanced that we couldn't even wrap our heads around it?
It's a humbling thought, for sure. It makes you realize just how much we don't know. And I think that's part of why these kinds of events fascinate us so much. They tap into that very human need to understand, to make sense of the world around us. But the Phoenix Lights didn't just spark our imaginations. It also raised some serious questions about trust. especially when it comes to how the government responded to the whole thing.
Absolutely. That initial denial from the military, followed by the later admission that, yeah, there were training exercises in the area, it fueled a lot of suspicion and distrust. People started wondering what else might be out there, what information might be being kept from them.
It definitely played into that whole skepticism toward authority that was really strong in the late 90s and early 2000s. People were demanding more transparency, more accountability. They didn't want to just be told what to believe. They wanted to see the evidence for themselves.
And you could argue that the Phoenix Lights became a symbol of that desire for truth, for answers that went beyond the official story.
It's like this one event became a lightning rod for all these bigger issues. Distrust of the government, the struggle to reconcile personal experiences with scientific explanations. It's pretty fascinating.
It is, and it shows how these events can act as a catalyst, bringing these larger societal questions to the forefront.
Like on the one hand, you have what people saw with their own eyes, and on the other, you have the explanations that science can offer. And sometimes those two things don't quite match up.
Exactly. Think about Governor Symington. He initially brushed off the incident, but he eventually changed his stance. He came out publicly and said that what he saw was beyond our current understanding.
Yeah, that's a pretty big statement for someone in his position. It makes you wonder, how do we approach events like this with both a critical and an open mind? How do we balance skepticism with the possibility that there might be things out there that science just hasn't explained yet?
It's a tough question, isn't it? It's like walking a tightrope.
It is. And I don't think there's an easy answer. On one hand, we need to be critical thinkers. We need to question the evidence, look for rational explanations. But on the other hand, we also need to be open to the possibility that there might be things out there that challenge our current understanding of how the world works.
And that's where things get really exciting, because it's in that space, that exploration of the unknown, where we can learn and grow. It's about acknowledging that there are still mysteries out there, things we haven't figured out. And that's okay.
I like that, embracing the mystery.
It's about being comfortable with not having all the answers.
So where does that leave us with the Phoenix Lights? What can we take away from all of this?
I think it boils down to this: be curious, be skeptical, but be open to the possibility that there might be something truly extraordinary out there. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even if the answers aren't easy to find. Keep looking up at the sky and never stop wondering.
It's amazing to think about everything we've uncovered in this deep dive.
I know, right? From those incredible eyewitness accounts to the official explanations, and even how this whole thing affected our culture.
It's wild. And throughout all of it, there's this one question that keeps popping back into my head.
What's that?
This whole event, the Phoenix Lights, what does it tell us about us? About our human need to make sense of things, to find answers.
That's a great question. And I think it gets right to the heart of why we're still so fascinated by the Phoenix Lights all these years later.
I mean, it's so much more than just some lights in the sky, right?
Exactly. It's about how we react when we're faced with the unknown, how we try to understand the things that challenge our whole view of the world.
For centuries, we've looked up at the stars and wondered, are we alone? What else is out there?
It's a question that's driven so much of our history, exploration, scientific discovery, even our art and stories.
And then something like the Phoenix Lights comes along. And it's this event that just defies explanation. It throws everything we thought we knew into question.
It makes those big questions about the universe feel a lot more real, a lot more urgent.
Like suddenly it's not just a philosophical thought experiment anymore.
Right. It becomes something we have to grapple with, something we have to try to understand.
It's almost like this event tapped into something primal in us, something deep down.
That sense of wonder, that curiosity, it's what drives us to search for answers. It's part of what makes us human.
But it also reveals our limitations, don't you think?
Absolutely. We're hardwired to look for certainty, for explanations that fit neatly into our existing knowledge.
And when we encounter something that doesn't fit that mold,
it can be unsettling, even a little scary. It forces us to confront the limits of what we know.
And that's where all those different interpretations come in, right?
Exactly. You have some people who see the Phoenix Lights as proof of extraterrestrial life.
Others see it as evidence of some kind of government cover-up or secret technology.
And then you have those who stick to the official explanation, even if it doesn't quite account for everything.
It's like we're all trying to fit this event into our own personal narratives to make it align with what we already believe.
It's a very human thing to do. We look for patterns. We try to create order out of chaos. But it also highlights how important it is to be critical thinkers, to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Because sometimes, as we've seen with the Phoenix Lights, The truth can be really hard to pin down.
It can be. And sometimes, maybe the answer itself isn't as important as the journey of seeking it out.
It's about exploring the evidence, considering different perspectives, keeping an open mind.
That's where the real learning happens. That's where we can grow and expand our understanding of the world around us.
So even if we never definitively solve the mystery of the Phoenix Lights,
The event itself has served a purpose. It's made us think. It's made us question.
it's reminded us that there's still so much out there that we don't understand.
And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the real lesson of the Phoenix Lights isn't about finding concrete answers, but about learning to be comfortable with the mystery
About acknowledging that there are things we may never fully understand.
and keeping that sense of wonder alive, that curiosity that drives us to learn and explore.
Because that's what leads us to new discoveries, to new understandings of ourselves and the universe we live in.
So what do you think? Are you ready to keep looking up?
Absolutely. I think we've only just scratched the surface of this whole mystery. And who knows what other wonders are out there waiting to be discovered. If you're as fascinated by the Phoenix Lights as we are, we encourage you to check out the show notes for links to articles, videos, eyewitness accounts, and more. Dive in, do some digging, and see what you can find. And as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Phoenix Lights? Do you have any theories of your own? Share them with us on social media, or leave us a comment on our website. Let's keep this conversation going and keep exploring together.
Until next time, keep those eyes on the sky and never stop questioning.